Welcome back, everybody, to Go Local Live. I'm Josh Fenton. We're at the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center, and it's been a busy day over here at Go Local. At about 2:30 today, we had an amazing 13-year-old female rap singer. If you haven't seen it, go check it out on any of our platforms. And then Kate Nagel had the 3 o'clock hour with a host of different folks. Very interesting Providence College professor and expert on the Healthcare Act, as well as some insights into UHIP and some complexities there. But Nathan Scher's here. Nathan Scher's a filmmaker. You may have seen some of his work, but he's got a big project going on. Do they call you Fellini? What exactly do they mention?
No, I am just an up-and-coming filmmaker, and I've been working in the business for about 20 years.
Great.
And it's been a long haul. It's been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot of things, but it's always learning something about filmmaking. Talk
a little bit about, this is not your first project, but let's talk a little bit about the project you're working on now. This is your biggest project today.
Oh, absolutely. I've worked on about a dozen short films over the past couple of years. I did a lot of other things, commercials and corporate films, but this is my first feature film. It's called Higher Methods. I have been working on this for about 2.5 years. It all started about 2.5 years ago, and we've had postponements, we had things that have gone wrong, but we're at a point now where we're at the tail end of post-production. We are close to picture lock. So basically, we've almost finished editing the entire film, and we just have to tweak a couple things and do things like color correcting, music composition, sound design, things like that. So we're at the very tail end of it, but the big thing happening with Higher Methods right now, if it's okay, I talk about that now.
Yeah, no, please. Well, talk a little bit about what's it about? What's the movie about? Well, what's the connection for people?
If I were to kind of give the log line for this, first of all, it is a psychological horror mystery, is what I would title it as if you had to give a genre. It is about an actor whose his name is Matthew, and 10 years prior, his sister has gone missing, who was also an actress. But one day, he's at the movie theater, and he sees his sister on the screen, and she hasn't aged a day. So this sparks him to go on this journey.
So a little Dorian Gray mixed with Phantom of the Opera, plus a few other things in there as well.
Yeah, a smorgasbord of ideas all converging together. So he goes on this journey, and he follows her trail to this acting group, which is led by an acting teacher. His name is John Edward Marcus, and he teaches these horrifying methods of basically teaching the actor performance. And it's a very, very almost like scary and life-changing experience that the main character goes through. And he basically kind of falls down the rabbit hole where he doesn't know what is truth and what is fiction. So it all kind of unravels. It's a very exciting movie, very dark movie, but I think it's a lot of fun. And I think people who are fans of like Alfred Hitchcock or David Lynch films will love this kind of movie.
Great. And you've been at it for 2.5 years. You've developed this. It's functionally your baby. When will the public really get to bite into it? There's a trailer. We'll have it on Go Local Live in the article tomorrow on Saturday. But when will this break out?
Well, the plan is to have the movie done by mid-June, and we are going to have some local screenings. That is for sure. That will be open to the public and one for the cast and crew.
Great.
So everybody who has been following this, and there's thousands of people that are following us on Facebook and Twitter and all over that are excited about this movie. So they will have a chance to see this summer, locally at least.
Yeah.
We are going to be submitting it to film festivals, some big ones, some more regional ones, so we're going to see how that all plays out. But in a more immediate sense, we are testing the movie next Wednesday at the URI campus in Kingston, Rhode Island. That is April 18th. So it is open to the public. I am asking my cast and crew not to come to this.
So it's next Wednesday down at URI.
Yes.
And is it open to the public, or are you looking to get the URI community?
It is. Well, there is actually a URI film class that is going to be in attendance there. One of the professors who I've been working with is bringing his class of 13 students down there, which is great. And there's an additional...
Well, you haven't heard from them yet.
Well, they say they're going to be there. And
no. They may be tough on you, right?
They might. Oh, I don't mind. Seriously, lay into this, because I need to know if this story makes sense. Are there characters that don't make sense in this film? So
Right.
there's a lot to be gained from this. Having a test screening is really going to tell us a lot about if we're going in the right direction with our editing process. And I think that's essential for any filmmaker to test it in front of an audience who is going to give back the filmmaker some constructive criticism, some constructive feedback.
Nathan, when you shot it, where was it shot on location?
We shot in many locations, but mostly in Pawtucket, Rhode Island,
Yeah.
at the Mixed Magic Theater.
Great.
Was one of our big locations.
Yeah.
Motif Magazine was another big location.
Yeah.
We shot at the Dedham Community Theater
Yeah.
in Dedham, Mass.
Yeah.
We shot in my house in Seekonk.
Excellent.
And another big location we had was Country Gardens Bed and Breakfast in Rehoboth, Mass.
So you really went all over the place in New England.
Yeah, and there were more, but yeah,
Yeah.
we bounced all around Rhode Island and Massachusetts. A lot of these locations were people that I've met over the past couple of years through networking events that I basically pulled a lot of favors to get myself into some locations. So
It's always great to hear how filmmakers, especially in the early stages of their career, put together the team that helps them launch. And it's always a very similar story. It's not anybody gets $100 million for their first film. It's always I borrowed this and I stole this person's credit card and we hijacked a truck and this, that, and the other thing. And a lot of people in Rhode Island remember when Federal Hill came out and. That was another one, and it put Correnti a little bit on the map for a little while, and then, you see it again and again. There was just filmed outside here. On the next block was the story about the heist called the Vault, famous robbery tied to.
I know him. Yeah, he's behind that.
Right.
But we crawled and scratched our way to get our funding. A lot of it was through crowdfunding.
Great.
We ran a couple of campaigns. That had varying levels of success, but it got the movie in the can, and it got us to where we are now.
And if you had, if somebody's right behind you and starting off, and they're looking for some pointers, what would you say to them? What did you learn in the crowd, sourcing strategy in trying to put together a good message about what you're doing and engaging people to participate and make a contribution?
Well, there's a lot of things. I have to give credit to somebody who there was a guest speaker a couple days ago that I filmed, and he had this great quote. He's an entrepreneur, and it's all about having unwavering self-confidence.
Yeah, sure.
Is a huge asset to have. Not taking no for an answer, because every no is closer to a yes.
Right.
Having that confidence to keep going forward and not get down when things don't go right, because in the indie film world, so many things can go wrong, and they will go wrong, especially if you're new, learning the whole business. So
listen, we're a startup. When we started about 8 years ago, one of our competitors, if we have competitors, was the Providence Journal. They had about 110 reporters when we launched, and now they have between 10 and 15. So, I'm not sure. Everybody realizes how fast the world moves and how quickly somebody can emerge as an entrepreneur and be able to develop a strategy. You've got a couple other events. Talk about the other one that you're going to do up at.
Yeah, so we talked about the test screening, but the other big thing that's happening in a little over a month is a cocktail party fundraiser, which is happening on Friday evening, May 11th, at the Bravo Brasserie, which is right across from Trinity in downtown Providence. And doors open at 7:30, and at 8 o'clock to 11 o'clock, we have a variety of entertainment, which is going to be great. We have musical guest Nikki Luparelli, who's a fantastic local musician and entertainer.
Great.
We also have 3 stand-up comics that are doing up like 20-minute sets. Alan Souza, J.J. Jones, and Cody Frazier. And
Does anybody ever do sit-down comic? Right? Is anybody a sit-down comic?
I bet yeah.
Is that more skilled? If you're a stand-up comic, are you more skilled than sitting down?
I think the stand-up is be able to walk back and forth, and
Got
I don't know.
Right.
They're doing this whole thing,
Right.
so I don't know. If it's your thing. And the last thing I just want to say is that we have 2 improv comedy groups as well, which also do a lot of audience interaction. Where they call out give me a prop, give me a thing, whatever it is. So it's going to be a lot of fun. this night. This is going to be hot hors d'oeuvres. There's a cash bar. It's going to be a great night of adult entertainment. So I'm saying that because some of the comics might be adult oriented.
You don't want to bring your 9-year-old to that. He'll go to school.
I'm leaving my children at home. Yeah.
He goes to school the next Monday and may say some things to the teacher that would be less than appropriate. Listen, congratulations. We really love, we spend a lot of time in the arts community talking to folks. We really love entrepreneurs, fueling the economy and building things. And, as you know, and as we know here, there's no easy path. There's no shortcuts. There's no, it's about passion and energy and that stick with itness.
Yeah, and you got to put the work in. I want to just say one last thing. I know
Please.
You got to go, but
I don't have to go.
Something else I just want to mention. I think this is great for any other independent filmmakers out there. I like to give back to the indie film world as well, and I also produce a show called Indie Filmworks, which I've up to 15 episodes, and I actually just did one yesterday, and it's all about my point of view of producing short films, feature films, and everything that I've learned, I share back with the film community.
Great. We'll put links to that as well in tomorrow's article. Keep us up to date. We want to know when this thing breaks loose. We want to get you back here. We want you back. And, just a little reminder to the little people here. When you get that shiny gold Oscar, just remember us back at GoLocal Live, okay?
I just got to remember to thank my wife. That's the biggest thing. I get that nudge all the time because this happens, you lose it, That would be that'd be pretty amazing. We'll see what happens.
That's great. We're going to be right back in about 1 minute. We're going to have former U.S. Attorney Peter Nerona, candidate for Attorney General of Rhode Island. Nathan, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody, to GoLocal Live. I'm Josh Fenton. This is my guest, Peter Nerona. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. It is Friday afternoon. It has been a busy week. I am not a Friday guy. I'm not one of those people who say, thank God it's Friday. Right. This is a thank God it's Friday day. It's been busy. There's a lot of things going on. We invite you on to talk about a few things, but sure. I really want to go to Washington, D.C. Let's go to Washington. I've never seen anything. I worked for 2 U.S. senators back in the 80s, and during very complex periods of time, there's nothing like what we're seeing right now. We're seeing just it's almost Watergate-like period of time in which the foundation of the country is being challenged and stretched and really looked at. Give a little thought, from your time at the Justice Department of what you see and what your takeaway is.
Yeah, I spent 15 years, Josh, in the Justice Department, and those were stable years.
Right.
I served under President Bush, Republican administration. I was U.S. Attorney in the Obama administration. There were nuances and differences in sort of how we approach things, but we weren't where we are today, right? Where the independence of the Justice Department is being challenged. The president doesn't have faith in his own Justice Department. There are words that President Obama said to us.
Yeah.
When I first became U.S. Attorney, we were in the East Room. President Obama came in, and I remember these words like they were yesterday. He said, I appointed you, but you don't serve me, you serve the American people. I expect you to act independently and with good judgment. You know, that was sort of the bedrock. Whether he said it, or I'm sure President Bush said something much like that, that's how we looked at the Justice Department. Those foundations are really being challenged now. And, you know, as some of my colleagues had said, get ready for the weekend, because who knows where Rod Rosenstein will be, the Deputy Attorney General, by Monday, by tonight, by the time we finish.
Right, absolutely. And you're just old enough, and I'm just old enough to remember the Saturday Night Massacre, in which functionally President Nixon ordered person after person after person to be dismissed relative to the special independent prosecutor at the time. Well, you know Bob Mueller.
I do.
And he's as stiff-chinned an individual, both figuratively and literally, as about anybody. He's not backing down. Let me ask you a question, though. This started really with an examination of the influence of Russia and what the impact was. I think that's where it started.
Probably,
and now we're into strippers and pay. Does the president get any? Is there any concern that that these independent prosecutors, Alan Dershowitz is all about it, morning, noon, and night, go too far, or is it just, listen, you've got to chase every last piece of these cases to be able to understand where it all takes place?
Well, I think this first thing is we don't know everything that Mueller knows, obviously, right? And so there may be some connection between what they're finding in New York, or what's being reported that they're finding in New York, with what is the heartland of what Mueller appears to be investigating. But let's not also forget that when prosecutors go down a certain path, you often uncover things that you weren't expecting to find. When we did some of the corruption cases we did here when I was U.S. Attorney, we would start, and the Gordon Fox case comes to mind immediately. We were looking over here. We didn't find what we thought we'd find over here, but we found something else.
Right.
Well, you don't just ignore what you found. You need to do something with it, right? And so that could be what's happening. That, in other words, that Mueller, in the course of his investigation, found things that appear to be criminal misconduct. If there are payments being made, whether it be to a porn star or not, and they are an in-kind contribution to a campaign, that needs to be run down. He handed it off, apparently, to New York, and that's being run down. But I don't think that. And then I've also heard the argument, well, sometimes these are just campaign violations. Well, don't forget, again, close to home, Gordon Fox, that was classically a campaign finance issue in the beginning. Later, we found the bribe. But we have to ask ourselves, do we want our public officials, do we ever want to say about our public officials, well, they broke the law, or people close to those public officials broke the law, but these aren't serious violations.
Well, listen, Kate Nagel had a story, you can look at it as poo-poo, not a big deal, or you can look at it, what stops them from literally running their campaigns. Kate Nagel had a story this week about Mayor Lombardi in North Providence, who's using his secretary to send out attack pieces for his ally, the lieutenant governor, against the challenger, Aaron Ruggenberg, and the mayor of Providence. And no two ways about it. It was a political document being sent out to reporters out of the office with a municipal worker using municipal equipment. And when she called him, he said, well, yeah, I guess I did it, but I'm focused on the city's finances. So thus it must be okay, because I'm focused on the city's finances. And it looks to be that there's no apparatus to pursue that. It's not a personal gain. Right. So the Ethics Commission has not really stepped into that realm. But just to go back to D.C., are we... I think you've heard even Republican senators really draw the line on firing members of the Justice Department or firing the special prosecutor.
Right. Well, I would hope so. Look, Rod Rosenstein, I've known him a long time. Rod was appointed by President Bush as U.S. Attorney in Baltimore, served throughout the Bush administration, was reappointed by President Obama. I think he was at one point a nominee for the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. That's the kind of caliber of the person Rod Rosenstein is. Now, Rod and I have known him a long time. We are very different in terms of our approach to criminal justice. Yeah. But I have tremendous respect for him and no question whatsoever about his integrity. So to remove Rod Rosenstein, I don't see a legitimate cause for doing that, except that you don't like the anticipated result. So I think it would be a mistake, and I think it's right for members of Congress, and frankly, for anyone who has a voice, to stand up and say so.
Do you have any predictions on this?
On where it ends? Oh my God.
Where it ends Monday? Where will we be Monday?
I get in the car to drive up and see you, and 6 things have happened on the 30 minutes it took me to get here. So no, I don't have any predictions, although I will say, I think I think we'll know Rod Rosenstein's fate probably within 48 hours.
Yeah. I had breakfast the other day with a former very high-level Trump person on the campaign, and he thought that the investigation into the president's lawyer, personal lawyer, was a game changer in where this case is going. Not negatively or positively, he wasn't critiquing the investigation, but that, oh my God, we've gone to a place we've never been before, and that's going to create a ton of new information, a trove of information.
Well, it could, and there's been a lot of talk about, that search warrant that was obtained. Again, you have to go back and go through how these search warrants are obtained by a U.S. Attorney's Office, whether it be in New York or here. If you're going to get a search warrant for a lawyer's office,
In his home,
in his hotel.
Right.
Curious to me as to why he had a hotel. There's probably an explanation for that. But I couldn't really understand why he had a hotel room in addition to an office and a home. But in any event, leave that aside. There's a lot of procedures you have to go through. You've got to, obviously, you've got to establish probable cause for each and everything you're evaluating. That's got to be signed off by.
And
a
I
judge.
can't imagine that a federal judge is wildly excited about giving a search warrant.
I got to tell you, I went over to court myself. AUSAs go with the agents to get warrants signed. Now, I got to tell you, the magistrate judges here, they pick through warrants on what some would say are cases that pale in comparison to this one. So there's a lot of fail-safes in place within the Justice Department. Again, I go back to the Gordon Fox case, and we got a search warrant in that case. We had to get that approved in Washington, both because it was a public official. We wanted to make sure we were doing it right. So think about this for a minute. This is the president's personal lawyer. Think about the steps that had to be taken. Think about the scrutiny the judge gave it. So, I have no doubt that those procedures were followed appropriately.
Let's come back closer to home. There's a lot of things going on here. Sure. First of all, we're now officially into campaign mode. And the governor's race is the 800-pound gorilla, which will make everything amazingly complicated. Some days it will be wonderful sport for folks like us, and other days it will just be living hell, because as the campaign goes along and it gets more and more competitive, their nerves are slightly frayed, to put it mildly. How do you get your message out in Rhode Island when you've got who knows how many, 10 candidates for governor spending tens of millions of dollars? I mean, it could be a $15 million race when all's said and done. If Chafee gets in, Matt Brown raises some money. How do you get your message out to voters about the Attorney General's office and what you're hoping to do and what your experience has been?
Yeah, well, I think one thing that helps me a little bit is that I was the U.S. Attorney for so long. So I start from a place where if I'm going to speak to people, they tend to want to come and hear what I have to say. So that's been a huge help. I don't know that I realized that at the time, but it's been a huge help. So, I spoke at CCRI this week on Law Day. There were I was invited there in my former U.S. Attorney capacity, but just a chance for me to sort of reach people, talk about my career and what I think the AG's office, ought to do. So that's been a help. But a lot of it is just being out there. So, I'll be out speaking 3 or 4 nights a week. Sometimes it's a group of 20 people. Sometimes it's a group of 50. You've got to put the work in and try to reach people. But I will say that the AG's office has got such a broad mission, and it's such an important office that there's lots to talk about, right? If you can get people in a room, you can talk for a really, really long time about things that matter to them. And that can be a conversation that happens, on the south side of Providence. It can happen in Newport, up on the east side. Lots of issues to talk about.
Let's talk about a couple, DACA. What's your take on where we are right now, the legislation that's pending at the General Assembly, and public policy as a whole on this?
Yeah, look, I think it's easy to be tough on immigration if you've never met a dreamer, right?
Yeah.
I made a lot of visits to high schools around the state on this opioid crisis. Some of them in communities where there were either dreamers in the group that I was speaking to, Central Falls comes to mind, Providence, elsewhere, or dreamers in their families, right? It's very hard not to be thoughtful about immigration when you're actually seeing somebody who's impacted by it, right? So where do I come out on it? My approach to immigration is this, that we should be focused on people who drive violent crime. We have limited law enforcement resources. Providence is supposed to have 500 people on the job. They have 400. They used to police like a 600-person agency with overtime.
Yep.
They've got to focus on people driving violent crime, whether they are citizens, whether they're green card holders, or whether they are undocumented folks. So when I look at immigration, I look at it through that threat picture lens. We ought to have a comprehensive immigration policy that makes sense. I don't think it's good policy to go after the low-hanging fruit. People are in the country, they're undocumented, they're working here, they have families, they're raising children who are citizens. From a policy perspective, that doesn't make sense to me. From a law enforcement perspective, certainly from local law enforcement, it doesn't make a lot of sense for me to prioritize those folks. I got asked when I was still U.S. Attorney about the president's plan to bring 10,000 new federal agents on to pursue immigration issues. My thing was, well, my response was, if I had 10,000 new federal law enforcement agents, I'd put them in St. Louis and in Chicago and Baltimore, Washington to go after violent crime. That's what the threat is.
The Obama administration, though, led, record numbers of deportations. I think Reagan's biggest year was like 16 or 18,000. You jump up to Obama's years, he averaged about 300,000 on an annualized basis.
Yeah, what the president was trying to do is to try to get folks who would just go over the border and were undocumented out of the country quickly. So within a certain time frame.
Is that under the term of catch and release?
Yeah, I think it's catch and return, right? So before someone is established here, before they've sort of made, in a sense, become part of the community, raised kids here, sort of created the entangling relationships, for lack of a better word, that make it harder for them to go back. Raising children who have never learned the home language, for example. That policy made sense. There's no question we need to secure our borders. It's not just folks who are coming over undocumented. There's guns going south, there's drugs coming north. A lot of our narcotics cases, when I was U.S. Attorney, were large cartel-related cases that were the result of having a somewhat porous border. So lots of work to do in this space, but it's got to be thoughtful. It can't be reactive.
I've come to the conclusion that the reason why we don't have a modernized immigration policy is because both parties love to play the immigration card. It's to their bases. It's great messaging. You're evil. You won't make the country safe. And until I don't know when we break the stalemate in D.C., but at some point we absolutely have to. Talk a little bit about, I think the biggest economic issue facing Rhode Island right now is the lack of a healthcare policy related to our hospital networks. It's a massive component of our economy. It's about, I think you're married to part of it, correct?
I'm married to a primary care doctor, for sure, the baseline of the healthcare.
Right, so, it's 50,000 direct, it's about 70,000 direct employee people are employed in it out of a total universe of about 500,000. They're well paid, they're well educated, and we seem to have a hospital conversion structure that is incomplete, and also, and at least the last one, doesn't seem to have the necessary expertise to do the analysis. If somebody who's doing due diligence on buying a $100 million corporation, right, and you brought in experts from accounting firms or McKinsey, you would dig into it and there would be experts on this. And at the Attorney General's office, maybe there's one person who knows about the hospital industry, maybe. Right now, I don't think there's anyone. Learning on the fly about deals worth billions of dollars. How do we fix that?
Yeah, I think there are really two questions that you're
I layered about 6 in there, but you can pick any two of them.
I think there are two principal ones, right? One is sort of transactional based, right? Should this merger happen or not happen, right? And what should be the factors that we're looking at in analyzing that merger, and where's the expertise we need to do it right? So maybe that's 3 questions within one question, but that's sort of looking at it
and then I have a follow-up.
On a transactional basis, right? And sure, we need that expertise in the AG's office. I like the idea of bringing, St. Joe's comes up in our conversations in the past. I like the idea of bringing more pension expertise into that analysis. But if we only talk about this issue in the context of an individual transaction, we're missing a huge piece. 100%. And that piece is the strategic thinking around healthcare. And I've done a lot of sort of making the rounds to people that I respect in healthcare, asking the question, who's doing strategic thinking here? What kind of strategic thinking are we doing? And do you know that someone showed me the last statewide strategic plan in healthcare, and it covers 1987 until 1992.
I think there's a little newer one on the issue of do we have too many beds. There's a big report on too many beds. Mike Fine's been here a number of times, and he's a smart guy and a fair broker on this, and he's an ex-primary care physician, so he knows it.
He's great.
And he has
a lot.
Yeah, and he gets the economics of it. One of his arguments about why you don't close Landmark is because Woonsocket in that area needs the business. So it takes a little bit different tact that you can't have all the entire healthcare industry just in Providence. One of the things we've looked at, and I think Superman's a reminder of it, God, it was great having Fleet here. as they rolled up 13 different deals over about 10 years. But the last deal didn't work out so well for us when they sold to Bank of America.
Right.
And now you've got partners knocking at the door. Their annual budget is 50% larger than the state of Rhode Island's. It's a $13 billion budget. How can anybody, if they were to come in here and acquire significant assets, stand up to that? Governors can't stand up to that. Attorney generals can't stand up to it. They employ 70,000 people. 70,000 people in Massachusetts.
Well, right, exactly right. And yet in Massachusetts, they have about 26% of the market.
They do.
Right?
Yep.
So it's a huge organization.
In part because the attorney general up there has said, no,
Correct.
You're done.
Correct. Right.
So they come down here to.
Right. Right. So without prejudging that, right? Because if things work out for me in the end, who knows? Maybe that issue will be on my plate. Not to get ahead of that issue, but your point again, we come back to that point of strategic thinking. How big is too big?
Right.
Whether it's them or anybody else.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
You know, Coastal, and I'm going to state my bias here. My wife is a partner at Coastal, but Coastal is doing great work. They're small, mostly primary care group.
Right.
They do, from what I understand, excellent. No one disputes that they do excellent work, and they keep costs down. We don't want to get to a place where it's big is so big we drive out innovation, whether it's them or somebody else. So this is the kind of strategic thinking that needs to happen that doesn't, right? If you know, where are our hospitals? Why are they there? What kind of health is being delivered in and out of those hospitals? We need to go up to 50,000 feet and think about those issues there before we analyze individual transactions. Because if you don't, how can you analyze an individual transaction if you can't put it in the context of your overall strategic thinking?
John Holliver was here from Charter Care, the president in Rhode Island, and he made the point, you know, with the changes in technology and outpatients and efforts to push towards much more primary care interaction with the patient rather than emergency room and hospitalization. You know, we may not go down from 2,000 to 1,200. We may go down from 2,000 to 500 because of really how healthcare is delivered and needs to be delivered.
Well, and look at that cuts cost, right?
Right.
I mean, my wife sees patients on Saturdays because it keeps patients out of the ER, lowers costs, better results, shorter waits.
And she doesn't have to go campaigning with you.
that may be the ulterior motive. But no, you know, but there are consequences whenever you make a shift like that. So we have to be thinking about that strategically. So what's the role of the AG in that larger strategic thinking? You know, I think the Office of AG, like the Office of U.S. Attorney, has a role as a bully pulpit, as a convener. It may be that either working, you know, sort of alone or with another governmental partner, say the governor's office perhaps, you could team up, get everybody in a room, and start doing some strategic thinking. I know it's been tried before with sort of mixed success, but I don't think we can ever sort of give up and say we don't need to do the strategic thinking. Otherwise, we're going to make mistakes. Let's
talk about partisanship or bipartisanship or however we want to cut it. 2 months ago, we would have said, gee, if we were betting in Vegas, Gina Raimondo's you know, a 2-to-1 odd favorite. Now Matt Brown may run, other people may run. Her negatives are high. It's a very dynamic race, and she may be a slightly less favorite in this environment. If Patricia Morgan or Alan Fung or Matt Brown or Lincoln Chafee, or I can go down the list, become governor, do you think you're going to be capable, comfortable with working across the aisle with any of those folks in developing strategies who, you know, potentially could foresee you as a challenger because you're a Democrat?
Well, look, you know, I was a Democratic appointee of the President Obama, of course. But leave the politics out of it. You know, there was very little that we could get done when I was U.S. Attorney, although the federal government has tremendous power without partners. So I had to partner with Peter Comart and Patrick Lynch, whether they were friends or not. We had to work together to get work done. We had to partner with state police, even though we were a federal agency, to get things done. And so part of it is getting people together in the room. You know, our urban violent crime initiative was a function of the FBI, ATF, DEA, state police, and Providence Police, us and the AG's office. At various times, not always on the same page, but we got in a room and we got the mission done. So, look, you figure out what the mission is. The priority is to serve the people of Rhode Island, and you get it done. You know, some of these people I know. I tried cases with Alan Fung when I was in the AG's office with him. I try to set personalities aside and simply get the job done. I found that it served me well as U.S. Attorney, and I like to think I could do it as AG.
Last thing, let's go back to immigration. We've written a number of stories about certain elements targeting undocumented folks, really in a very perverse way. It seems to be based on immigration attorneys that we talk to. That is a growing business. It is a greater and greater problem as folks are concerned about deportation because of this federal administration. They're looking for help in all the wrong places.
Yeah.
As as Attorney General, is that the kind of thing that you put a task force on, that you really dedicate some resources and try and break that up?
Absolutely on the prosecutorial side. But here's another way to attack this issue, and I talk about this a lot when I'm out and about because I really believe in it. The best way you can serve the people of Rhode Island and in urban centers and the immigrant community is get your people out into the community.
Yeah.
So, look, if someone in the community has to come to 150 South Main or 100 Westminster to see somebody in the U.S. Attorney's Office or the AG's office, it's never going to happen, right? So get your lawyers out there. Get them out there during the day. Get them out there when people are home from work. Get them out there in the evenings. Be in a place where if you've got an issue around immigration or around consumer issues or nuisance issues, right? Have code enforcement. Have a place where somebody from the community can go in and speak to somebody on your staff. And if you could co-locate that with other branches of government, the Treasurer's Office, Secretary of State around voting, for example, voting discrimination, housing, you can get a lot done. So yeah, there are two ways to skin it. You've got to have an aggressive enforcement component, but mostly you've got to make sure that you're hearing the complaints. And you're not going to hear them if you never leave 150 South Main.
Last question, hypothetical. Everything goes wrong down in
when you ask these hypotheticals.
Everything goes wrong in D.C. The president fires this one, who fires that one. Jeff Sessions calls you and says, "I need you to serve our country. Come on down."
No, I'm committed. I'm committed to trying to become the next AG. Yeah, no,
I was going to text him right when we got off.
No, I don't think I'm going to get that call. But you know, I'm committed to doing this. I really feel like that's where my talents. If I can convince the voters to send me there, can be best used.
And your favorite part, fundraising? Is that your favorite part of running for?
I don't know that anybody likes that. Yeah. But I will tell you, people have been great, and it's a sort of, I don't want to call it it is a necessary evil. You get it done, and then you get out and talk to people.
Well, I do think there's one element, which is it makes you accountable. I mean, it may make you accountable to a group that's a subset, but you've got to get on the phone and convince people that you're the best candidate for doing it. And, you know, it's how democracies run. And
it's true, although, you know, the truth is you do that whether you're speaking to people who are contributors or not. I mean,
absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, my messages are always the same. They're built around some core themes that I think are important, but there are two principal ones. Good judgment, and then the second one is engagement. You can have the best judgment in the world, but if you're not engaging with the communities that you serve, the judgment does you no good at all.
I believe Putin raised no money for his most recent re-election.
That's a different system over
That
there,
is
right?
a slightly different system. There's no primary there. And anyone who runs seems to have accidents along the way.
Right.
Listen, I want to thank you so much for coming in. Thank everybody for tuning in this week. We'll be back on Monday with Business Monday, as well as news and politics and just about everything else. Have a great weekend. Stay tuned this weekend for a bunch of interesting content that's coming out on GoLocal. Peter Nerona, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks, Josh. Goodbye, everybody.